Think you know where horror begins and ends on the screen? You might want to take another look. Some of the most disturbing moments in cinema don't come from the monsters, the killers, or the phantoms written into the script. They come from fleeting shapes that slip into the frame without warning. A shadow in a place where no one should be standing. A face reflected in glass that wasn't supposed to hold any reflection. A figure that appears only in the earliest versions of a film, then vanishes in every release that follows. For years, collectors and obsessive viewers have pored over old prints, pausing and rewinding over and over, trying to understand how certain images ended up on screen. Directors deny them, cinematographers insist they're impossible, editors swear no such frame ever existed in their cut, and yet the evidence remains buried in deteriorating negatives, preserved in aging home recordings, or circulating quietly among fans who caught something that wasn't meant to be there. Imagine watching a scene you've seen countless times, only to notice an outline in the corner, watching, waiting, unmoving. These aren't staged scares or crafted illusions. They are unexpected intrusions, moments where the camera seems to capture something it was never meant to witness. Tonight, we step into that unsettling territory. 15 horror films, each hiding a moment that doesn't belong, each containing a detail no one can fully explain. These are the frames that slipped past the director, past the editor, past the audience until now. Let's descend into the darkness. Fact 1. Don't go to sleep. 1982. Television horror often hides moments that slip past viewers, but Don't Go to Sleep contains an anomaly so abrupt and inexplicable that it has survived across decades of bootleg recordings. In a slow, drifting nighttime shot across a dim living room, the frame captures an empty doorway, empty for only the briefest instant. Suddenly, a child-sized silhouette darts across the gap, low to the floor and moving with unnatural smoothness. The movement is sharp, precise, and completely out of step with human motion. Crew members later stated that no child actors were on set during the sequence. Lighting conditions cannot account for the crispness of the figure, and no shadows or props existed in the shot's trajectory. The anomaly appears only in original broadcast recordings. Later, cable and DVD releases remove or crop the frame, leaving the moment preserved only in deteriorating tapes traded by collectors. What makes this fleeting intrusion so haunting is its clarity. It doesn't behave like a trick of light or a camera smear. It behaves like something passing through a presence with its own speed and intention, captured by accident in the blink of an eye. Fact 2. Terror in the Aisles. 1984. Although Terror in the Aisles is a compilation of other horror films, one of its most disturbing images wasn't borrowed from any source material. During a transitional shot inside an empty movie theater, the camera glides across rows of seats illuminated by the dim glow of a screen. Everything seems still until, in the shadowed back row, a faint face emerges, pale, motionless, staring straight toward the camera. According to production accounts, only a narrator, the cameraman, and a small lighting team were present. No extras were used. The back rows remained in complete shadow, and the angles were carefully chosen to eliminate reflections. Still, the figure appears clearly in early TV recordings, leaning forward ever so slightly, as if watching not the film within the film, but the viewer on the other side of the screen. Later, remasters soften the anomaly, but they never remove it entirely. The faint outline persists like a ghost trapped between frames, too subtle to serve as a deliberate scare, yet too distinct to dismiss. The moment stands out because it imposes a narrative presence where none was intended. A film meant to celebrate horror ends up capturing something far stranger, an uninvited spectator in a theater that was supposed to be empty. Fact 3. Ghost Keeper. 1981. The frigid isolation of Ghost Keeper settles into every corner of its sprawling lodge. But one maintenance room sequence contains a presence that no member of the cast or crew has ever been able to account for. The scene shows 3 characters moving through a cramped, tool-lined space. As they argue, the camera shifts just enough to reveal the far corner, where a tall, unmoving figure stands partially hidden among hanging implements. Not a sound, not a breath, not a flicker, just a still silhouette watching from the dark. The shoot was conducted with a skeletal crew, and production logs confirm only the 3 actors and a camera operator were present. The room was too small to allow anyone else inside without being obvious, and no one recalls a crew member slipping into the shot. Yet, in early VHS and 16mm prints, the figure is undeniably visible, upright, human-shaped, and perfectly still. When the film was digitized later, color grading and compression softened the anomaly. But collectors who own older transfer copies note that the shape remains too defined to be a shadow or incidental artifact. It stands independent of the actor's movements and does not distort with changes in lighting. What makes the moment so disquieting is its utter detachment from the film's narrative. It does not participate in the scene. It does not react. It does not belong. It is an observer captured by accident, silent, patient, and frozen in the grain of the film. Fact 4. The House Where Evil Dwells. 1982. Among the drifting fog and rolling storm clouds of The House Where Evil Dwells, a single shot offers one of the film's most enigmatic intrusions. As the camera moves across a landscape blanketed in mist, a human-like head forms within the swirling vapor. It holds shape for a moment, features faint yet recognizable before dissolving back into the fog as though it had never been there. Production reports confirm that no actors or crew stood near the fog machines during filming. The effect was intended to be purely atmospheric, with no practical elements that could create such a clear silhouette. Yet early theatrical prints show the shape with surprising precision. Later, home releases tone down the moment with color correction, but the head-shaped formation remains visible enough to raise suspicion. The anomaly doesn't behave like random fog patterns. Instead of drifting apart naturally, the shape retracts, almost as though stepping backward into the darkness. It does not interact with the environment, nor does it respond to light in a way that aligns with atmospheric effect. Its presence injects an unintended chill into the scene, one that feels separate from the film's narrative intentions. It appears, observes, and vanishes, leaving behind more questions than answers. Fact 5. Burnt Offerings, 1976. In Burnt Offerings, the mansion is less a setting than a living presence, absorbing footsteps, swallowing voices, and shaping the air around those who inhabit it. In a quiet scene on the upper floor, the protagonist drifts past a tall, dust-flecked mirror. For a moment, the glass brightens with reflected light, and in that glow, a figure appears at the far end of the corridor. It stands in perfect stillness, as though carved out of shadow. Yet in the real space, the corridor ends only a few steps behind the actress. There is no distance for such a figure to occupy, no alcove or doorway that could conceal a person. Production notes confirm the hall was clear, the set tightly controlled, the crew positioned well outside the frame. Still, in the glass, someone seems to be waiting. The anomaly isn't sharp or dramatic. Its power lies in its quiet certainty. The silhouette holds its place with the confidence of something that belongs, even though every record insists it shouldn't be there. The antique mirror, with its uneven surface, cannot properly account for the precision of the form. Warped glass bends, melts, elongates, but rarely invents. In early prints, the figure is strong, almost intrusive. Later editions blur it into a smear of gray, but even then, the outline pulses faintly beneath the surface. Like a memory, the film refuses to surrender. It feels less like a mistake and more like a glimpse into the house's private world. An inhabitant the characters never meet, but the camera captures all the same. A reminder that in Burnt Offerings, the mansion does not simply witness its occupants, it watches them. Fact 6. The Changeling, 1980. The unsettling power of the Changeling lies in its long, echoing hallways and its quiet insistence that something unseen shares the space with the living. One particular corridor scene captures this perfectly and unintentionally. As the protagonist walks down a dim passage, his shadow stretches along the wall in a predictable pattern. The camera tracks him smoothly until a second, smaller shadow materializes beside his, clearly shaped like that of a small child. It appears for only a breath, tilting ever so slightly as though watching him move, then vanishes as quickly as it arrived. According to production records, only the actor and the camera operator were present during the shot. Lighting was minimal and strictly directed. No props or crew members stood in any position capable of casting an additional shadow. Yet the anomaly appears consistently in early prints, unmistakably shaped and perfectly placed. Later, restorations obscure the shape with digital smoothing or cropping, but the moment lives on in original transfers circulated by collectors. The unexplained figure brings a heavy atmosphere to an otherwise simple shot. It does nothing, says nothing, yet its presence suggests an awareness, as though something else inhabits the corridor. It supports the film's thematic focus on unresolved loss, but its existence behind the scenes remains wholly unplanned. In a movie already haunted, the added shadow feels like the camera capturing a truth the production never intended to reveal. Fact 7. The Entity, 1000. 982. Among the many intense scenes in The Entity, one of the most inexplicable appears in a clinical, brightly lit laboratory setting, precisely the kind of environment where nothing supernatural should intrude. As the protagonist sits beneath harsh fluorescent lights, while researchers observe her, a faint, human-shaped glow materializes just behind her shoulder. It forms gradually, as if leaning toward her, then contracts and fades, never interacting with any physical element in the room. No additional actors were present for the shot. The set was tightly controlled, and the lighting was carefully fixed to prevent reflections or accidental silhouettes. Experienced cinematographers examining the footage have pointed out that the glow's shape and movement do not match lens flares, lighting anomalies, or exposure errors. It seems to breathe with the protagonist, shifting subtly in rhythm with her tension. When the film was remastered, the glow grew weaker, yet remained distinctly visible. This persistence suggests it was captured in camera rather than introduced by damage or degradation. Crew members have offered no satisfying explanation. Some dismissed it as an odd reflection, though no reflective surfaces were positioned where the glow appears. The scene's power lies in its subtlety. Nothing jumps, nothing screams. The glow simply observes, close enough to imply awareness but distant enough to remain ambiguous. In a film built on the theme of unseen forces invading the everyday, the faint outline behind the protagonist acts as a quiet confirmation. Not all intrusions are meant to be understood, and some are captured only because the camera happened to be rolling at the wrong moment. Fact 8. Dead and Buried, 1981. In Dead and Buried, a film wrapped in coastal fog and small-town secrets, one background anomaly stands out as one of its most perplexing. During a quiet moment inside a shuttered storefront, the protagonist walks past a glass display case. In the reflection behind him, a shadowy figure appears to move slow, drifting, almost curious. The motion doesn't match the protagonist's own, and it certainly doesn't align with the camera operator or any member of the crew. The filming location had been sealed for the sequence. Windows were blacked out to prevent stray reflections, and only 2 crew members were inside with the actor. Despite this, the figure's movement is visible in multiple early prints, gliding in a way that suggests its own trajectory rather than a distorted echo of someone else. Restoration teams have studied the footage and noted that the anomaly appears on the original negative. This rules out most forms of accidental damage or later manipulation. Yet even with modern tools, the figure's identity and its source remain unsolved. Later releases dull the shape, but the quiet motion behind the glass persists just enough to unsettle. The figure doesn't interact with the environment. It doesn't cast natural shadows, nor does it distort light in a consistent way. It simply slides through the background like a forgotten presence captured by the camera. In a film filled with hidden truths, this solitary motion behind the display case suggests a layer of horror entirely separate from the plot, something moving in the periphery, unseen by the characters, yet permanently recorded in the film's grain. Fact 9. Communion, 1989. Communion is already a film tangled in ambiguity and blurred perception, yet one subtle moment has become one of its most enduring mysteries. During a quiet scene inside the protagonist's cabin, the camera glides past a bookcase cluttered with personal items. In the glass of a framed photograph, something unusual appears: a tall, narrow figure wearing what looks like a brimmed hat, standing deep in the shadowed corner behind an open cabinet door. The figure doesn't shift, doesn't flicker, and doesn't resemble any actor on the call sheet. The production was small, tightly organized, and meticulously lit. Crew members later insisted that no one stood in that part of the cabin, and the set design did not include any tall props capable of creating such an illusion. Nevertheless, the figure appears consistently across multiple VHS, releases a dark, elongated presence positioned as though watching from the periphery. When the film underwent remastering, the anomaly softened, the edges blurred, and the figure's shape began to dissolve into the surrounding shadows. Yet even then, the silhouette retains enough definition to raise questions. Enthusiasts who specialize in film anomalies argue that the posture is too precise and too human to be an accidental shadow. What makes the moment so unsettling is the stillness. The figure does not respond to the camera's movement, nor does it appear as part of the narrative. Instead, it stands like an observer outside the story, calm and patient, captured only because the lens happened to pass across its position. In a film centered on encounters and the fragile boundary between reality and fear, the presence in the corner feels like a glimpse into something unintended, an observer who never belonged in the room at all. Fact 10. Ghost Story, 1981. Elegance defines much of Ghost Story, but one particular shot disrupts that carefully composed beauty with an inexplicable intrusion. As the camera tilts upward toward the second floor of a snow-covered mansion, a figure stands in the window sill, outlined by the frost, watching the scene unfold below. The script contains no reference to anyone occupying that space, and production accounts state that the upper level of the house was vacant during filming. Technicians who examined early prints confirmed the figure's presence with remarkable consistency. Despite varying lighting conditions, the silhouette remains clearly visible in all theatrical releases. When the film was remastered, the shape dulled, but its unmistakable posture still lingers behind the glass. Crew interviews offer no explanation. The position of the lighting rigs would not create a false human shape, and the angle of the shot rules out reflections. No one recalls a crew member inadvertently standing in the window, and the director denies any staged attempt at misdirection. What remains is a figure without context, silent, isolated, and perfectly framed within the architecture of the mansion. It does not move or acknowledge the story. It simply exists, suspended within a moment not meant to be inhabited. The anomaly endures as one of the film's most chilling accidents, proof that sometimes a frame contains more than the filmmakers ever intended the audience to see. Fact 11. The Appointment, 1981. The quiet tension of The Appointment reaches its most inexplicable point during a seemingly ordinary car sequence. As the protagonist drives along a lonely road, the camera captures her from the front seat, allowing a clear view of the rear-view mirror. For a fraction of a second, the faint outline of a child's face appears in the reflection, small, pale, and strangely calm. The back seat, according to every member of the crew, was entirely empty. Filming notes confirm that no child actors were present that day. The car rig used for shooting was sealed and monitored closely, leaving no space for stowaways or accidental intruders. The lighting configuration also rules out the possibility of a coincidental reflection. Yet the face lingers, fully formed, quietly watching from the shadows behind her. Viewers who saw the original broadcast remember the anomaly distinctly, while later releases obscure or remove the moment. Some believe deterioration of the negative altered the frame. Others suspect deliberate editing. The more the image is debated, the deeper the mystery becomes. The eerie stillness of the face stands in stark contrast to the protagonist's rising anxiety. It does not blink or shift. It simply exists calm, patient, and utterly out of place. This intrusion transforms a routine transitional shot into something deeply unsettling, a reminder that the lens sometimes records more than intended. Fact 12. Blood Sabbath, 1972. Deep within the murky forests of Blood Sabbath, a single shot has endured as one of the film's most disquieting puzzles. During a transitional moment, the camera follows a character stepping past a massive, weathered tree trunk. For a fleeting instant, a pale limb slips out from behind the bark fingers, extending subtly toward the lens before vanishing like a breath of smoke. It is so quick that many viewers miss it entirely, yet when noticed, it becomes impossible to unsee. Production notes reveal a controlled setup. Only one actor on screen, no supporting performers nearby, and a restricted crew presence. No one was positioned behind the tree, and the lighting was intentionally limited to avoid accidental reflections. The anomaly appears clearly in early theatrical reels, but later, home releases soften or remove the detail entirely, as though the moment was treated as an unwanted blemish. Theories have emerged over the years. Some attribute the appearance to a blend of shadow and overexposure. Others suggest an unnoticed crew member, though the height and posture of the limb do not match any known personnel. Enthusiasts who have examined multiple prints argue that the movement feels deliberate, almost purposeful, yet remains utterly disconnected from the action. Within Blood Sabbath, a film already anchored in ritualistic mysticism, this brief emergence within the misty woods becomes more than a visual oddity. It hints at the possibility of something watching, something moving just outside the intended frame, a presence not scripted, not acknowledged, and never truly explained. Fact 13. The Mediator, 1979. At first glance, The Mediator appears to be a straightforward, low-budget horror film, but one hallway sequence hides a detail that has fascinated frame-by-frame reviewers. As the protagonist walks through a dim, deserted corridor, a dark silhouette darts across the background with a speed and fluidity that defy physical explanation. The figure moves too quickly to be human, yet its shape is unmistakably anthropomorphic, gliding from one side of the screen to the other in a single unnerving motion. Only 3 people were present during the shoot. the actor, the camera operator, and a lighting assistant. None of them could have produced the shadow. The blocking and lighting design leave no room for stray movement, and the narrowness of the hallway eliminates the possibility of someone bypassing the crew unnoticed. Despite this, the anomaly remains consistent across all original prints of the film. Even more unsettling is that the figure does not behave like a typical shadow. It doesn't bend with the walls or react to the light as a physical object would. Instead, it seems detached from the physical environment, moving as though it exists in a different dimension superimposed onto the film. Fans have proposed numerous theories, film scratches, double exposure, uncredited extras, but none align with the footage. The anomaly is too distinct to ignore, yet too inexplicable to categorize. It exists in a liminal space, visible only to those who watch closely enough to witness its brief, spectral intrusion. This moment remains one of the most haunting in obscure horror cinema, a reminder that the camera sometimes captures more than the filmmakers ever intended. Fact 14. The hearse, 1980. Among the quiet, brooding moments of the hearse, one scene in particular has fueled debate among fans for years. As the protagonist drives past an abandoned house under the cover of night, the camera catches a glimpse of a second-story window. Standing behind the glass is a perfectly still figure, its form solid, its posture upright, its gaze directed toward the passing car, and the camera filming it. The shot is brief, yet its clarity leaves little room for misinterpretation. The production team has consistently stated that the house was completely unoccupied during filming. No extras were hired for the sequence. Only the lead actress and a handful of essential crew members were on location. The house itself was locked, and lighting was arranged specifically to avoid reflections from outside. Despite these precautions, the figure appears unmistakably in early prints. Later releases of the film, including home video and television cuts, diminish the image significantly. Some versions darken the window entirely, others blur the figure to the point of near invisibility. Whether this was a deliberate alteration or a byproduct of remastering remains unconfirmed, though it only deepens the mystery. The moment doesn't scream for attention, it doesn't move, doesn't gesture, doesn't behave like a character within the narrative. Instead, it stands quietly, as if observing both the protagonist and the audience. The stillness of the figure makes the intrusion all the more unnerving. It feels less like a mistake and more like an unintended guest that wandered into the frame and left behind a trace no one can justify. Fact 15. The Boogeyman, 1980. There is a particular moment in The Boogeyman that longtime viewers still struggle to explain. It occurs during a quiet scene inside a dim bedroom, where the camera glides slowly past a mirror meant only to echo the two actors in the room. Instead, a third face appears briefly, silently, and without any logical source. It lingers in the reflection for less than a second, yet its presence is so unexpectedly clear that it disrupts the illusion entirely, as if someone slipped into the shot without ever existing on the set. Production notes confirm that only the two actors and a minimal crew were present during the shoot. No one stood behind the camera who could have been reflected, and the mirror's angle was intentionally arranged to avoid unwanted shapes. Crew members deny any staged trick or prop. Even more puzzling is that this mysterious face shows up exclusively in the earliest theatrical prints. Later, VHS and DVD editions mute or erase it entirely, as though someone quietly decided it shouldn't remain. Cinephiles have offered countless theories. Some claim it was an unnoticed crew member. Others argue it was an artifact from aging film stock. Yet none of these suggestions match the clarity and positioning of the face. The anomaly becomes even more unsettling when one considers the boogeyman's themes, its obsession with mirrors, reflections, and the idea that something malevolent can return through surfaces that shouldn't hold meaning. Whether an accident, a technical impossibility, or something the lens captured without human intention, the moment endures as one of the film's most haunting mysteries. It remains frozen in that reflection, reminding viewers that sometimes the scariest elements are the ones no one meant to record. Bonus film: The Sentinel, 1977. Before we bring this journey to a close, there is one more film whose lingering anomaly deserves attention: The Sentinel. The movie is steeped in oppressive silence and unsettling religious undertones, but a hallway moment near its midpoint has remained one of its most debated mysteries. As the protagonist walks slowly past a row of dimly lit doorways, the camera drifts with her, capturing the claustrophobic architecture of the building. Then, in the narrow gap of a slightly open door, a face appears. It is pale, expressionless, entirely still, and unmistakably present for just long enough to feel intentional. Yet according to production records, no one was behind that door. The set was locked down, with only essential crew members permitted on the floor. Lighting charts show no reflective surfaces capable of producing a false image, and the door itself was not meant to reveal anything. Still, in early theatrical prints, the face is there watching without blinking, its presence unacknowledged by both actors and filmmakers. When the film was remastered decades later, the figure softened but did not disappear. Its shape remains discernible, as if embedded directly into the negative. Technicians noted that the anomaly behaves unlike a shadow or lighting error. Its contours are too defined, its posture too deliberate. This moment does not disrupt the narrative, nor does it announce itself with movement. Instead, it lingers quietly, an unintended visitor caught in the periphery. In a film already burdened by themes of spiritual intrusion, the silent face behind the door feels like a moment where fiction briefly intersected with something unplanned, something watching from the depths of the frame. If you followed these hidden intrusions all the way to the end, you already know that some of the most unsettling moments in horror aren't crafted, they simply appear. Which of these unexplained frames stayed with you the longest? Do you think they were accidents, tricks of aging, film stock, or something captured that was never meant to be seen? If exploring these forgotten corners of horror draws you in, stay close, there are deeper shadows waiting.